Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today's video is going to probably be a long one, and it's probably going to mostly appeal to my history. It's only going to appeal to my history geeks or nerds or whatever you want to call yourself. So I would suggest, since it's probably going to be a long one, that you grab a good cup of tea or hot chocolate or whatever you call it, and get snuggly, put on your earphones, and surrender to it because I think it'll be fun. Now, what I have done, and I'll peruse what I have on the table, is I have an assortment of tarot decks, beginning with the Vachier, followed by Noblet, followed by the Dodal, and the Madenié, and the Heri, and also the Payen 1743. Now, I could have chosen other ones. These were the ones that interested me the most to compare to one another. I'm not sure if I made it abundantly clear in yesterday's video, but I hope to clarify this statement right now. The Vachier is considered to be the oldest known existing Tarot of Marseille style decks, and particularly it introduces the type 1 TDM 1 variation. Now, the 1743 deck, which is 100 years later, we have the Tarot of Payen 1743, which is almost in every way, linear at least in every way, identical to this Vachier. Right? The printer who, printed it in 1743 may have opted for different colors. But the line work, the carving, is the exact same deck, which is very interesting. And the following reason explains why the Madenié of 1743 is the oldest, is the most recent of the oldest TDM1 styles. And that's because somewhere along the line, the Vachier plates that were printed in 1639 were either sold at auction or purchased by the Payen family, or maybe somebody in the Payen family was somehow, related to Vachier and through the generations came to possess the Vachier plates. So if you have a deck being printed in 1639 and 100 years later you purchase the plates, or you inherit the plates from the old Vachier Cartier, your deck is going, and you just print it, right? And you apply color. The deck is going to be identical to the 1639 because you had the same plates. The thing that you might change on it is the date, right? So that explains the mystery for why the Payen is the latest of the earliest styles of TDM1. Now, in between the two, we have the Noblet, which up until the Vachier surfaced, and thanks to Thierry de Paulus for discovering its existence, we had kind of figured that, at least for now, that the Noblet was the earliest of TDM1 style deck that we had. Then shortly thereafter, I guess about 50 years, that's not that shortly, but about 50 years later, we have the Dodal from 1701, and then the Madenié from the Pierre Madenié, 1709, the Heri of 1718, and then, of course, the Payen of 1743, which is identical in basically every way except perhaps color. Or if after 100 years some of the lines may have degraded, there might have been one or two differences in the line only because of the degradation. That might have happened. I'm not saying that that's exactly what happened, but it could be an explanation. So let me flip the camera. And if you want to know why I chose these particular ones, I don't know. I had to pick some, and so these were the ones that occurred to me might make an interesting comparison. Now, it would be interesting maybe to see how other, at some point, if I discover or I notice something with another deck, and this is the case with all the videos I do, if something strikes me, out of the clear blue, I'm likely to do a video of that. So if there's another TDM deck that strikes me to compare with Vachier, I will. I hope that made sense. Okay, let me flip the camera and do my very best to show side-by-side comparisons with each of these cards. And as I said, it's going to be a long one. So grab a cup of tea or cocoa, get your comfy shoes on and your comfy slippers and your blankie or whatever. And I have the luxury of not being at work because this is my work. But if you have to be at work, then you might want to wait until you get home. Okay, so I can't get them all in view, but I will pick them up and hold them to the camera. So here is the Vachier as published by Yves Renaud. And then here we have the Dodal. Now we notice right off the bat that there are some differences in the Dodal, although there's general adherence to a bearded fellow with a cap with perhaps jingles on it. He's got a stick with a pouch. They're not identical to one another, but they're similar. They have similar clothing, similar style. We have the animal, and we have a walking stick, but we also have exposure to private areas on the Noblet, and we also have a face that appears at the cap of the walking stick, which we don't see in the Vachier, and we don't see, in the next deck, the Dodal. And then there's difference in the ground here. So we don't have the same configuration of ground that we see in the Dodal. We still see the ground stuff being the same, strikingly similar. And the Dodal is 1701, but in the 1650-ish, we do see differences. So what does this suggest? Although for years we thought that the Noblet was the earliest of the TDM ones, it differs from TDM 1 in just the first card, if you want to see the Fool as the first card. So let's take a look. Let's compare it to the Dodal. Now this version is published by Fleur Noir, and although it's not a facsimile per se, I respect Fleur Noir's decision making when he makes it so that even if he made an area more understandable, he did not interfere with the integrity of the image. I hope that made sense. Now here with the Dodal, we see something that did not happen here in the Vachier, and we see that this animal, there's been a malfunction with the way it was printed, don't we? Let's take a look at the Madenié of 1709. Okay, so there's no such interference here. Again, now in the 1709, let's see, which is just, 8 years later than the Dodal, we see bells on the, what's that called? The shoulder, what hangs on the shoulder area. We see bells included around that area. We see pretty much the same face, pretty much the same idea of a stick with a pouch of the similar, with a spoon. We have the spoon kind of cap at the end. We have the same configuration on the ground, the same strange turning of the elbow. Here we have the Heri. So there's a general sense, even with the ground. Look at the ground, right? This is from 1718. So we still have a general acknowledgement of an earlier source. But it's with the Heri, I think this is. What is this one? The Madenié 1709 that added the bells on the shoulder. But of course, with the 1743 païenne, since they use the same plates in 1743 as they did in 1639, we don't have them. So that would explain the difference in TDM1 style of the Dodal. I think this is, excuse me. So that must be a different thing, separating the TDM1 from TDM2. Although there's an adherence to a lot of the details, maybe we'll see if the jingle bells on the collar is one of the differences. So let's go through them and find out. Now this is going to start getting awkward for me because I can see it now. I'm going to start getting confused about which deck goes where. So please be patient with me. I may have to go off camera a few times, so please bear with me. Now this bottom Dodal that I have, if I need clarification on either, with anything that's going on in this Dodal, I have the Sullivan-Hissman's Dodal, which is, again, I would respect it as a close facsimile. If the changes were made, it's adhered at least to the authenticity of the original. Okay, so here we have the Bateleur. And then of the Noblet, we see there's a similarity, but again, in the second card, could it be a broken plate that gives us what appears to be a phallic thing? I don't know if anybody knows for sure. People might bet money on it either way. But we don't have the same face. We don't see the same face. We see the same idea in hat and clothing, and perhaps there was or wasn't a wand, in this hand. But we already know that the Fool card took liberties, so would it surprise any of us if this card took certain liberties? It might have. We see similar things on the table. And I should mention that the three-legged table of the Bateleur seems to have been the way it always was. It wasn't like some, unless there's another deck before this 1639 deck, that showed four legs. As far as we know, there were always only three legs on the table. So let's look at the Dodal. 13 minutes in and we're only on the first card. So we see very similar things on the table in the same area. I mean, the Fleur Noire added color to some of the orb things on the table. But generally, everything is pretty much very similar. Okay, now this one is the Madenié 1709, not too many years later than the Dodal. Oh yes, and then look at the faces. We have the same two faces that we didn't have here. So with the Dodal, it seems like it's it seems like the Noblet might have just been a variation of TDM1, but like a specialty deck maybe. I don't know, because there's differences, right? Now here we have the Madenié. And although he's a blonde, there's a more refinement of face and feature. He does have the correct kind of baton. Similar placement of objects. So there is a refinement. There are no buttons down his front. We lost the buttons that we had in these two. Heri. Similar objects on the table, similar posture, similar clothing, different face. Let's see if it compares to this one we just saw. Yeah, these two. The Madenié 1709 and the Heri of 1718 do seem to be more similar in their facial features. So I'm probably going to have to limit this video to just the Triumph cards, right? Because otherwise we'll be here all day. So I don't really want to do that to either of us. Okay, so we have a specific tiered crown on the female Pope. I wouldn't say they have the same face. This is in the Noblet. And certainly they have a different thing going on in their garb. But they do both have a similarity of the curtain or veil. They have a similar style of crown. They have the book. But there's more confusion. It's more geometric in the Noblet about what's going on. Here, I think the lap is still easier to figure out. I'm not sure what's going on in this corner here. Now we have the Dodal. Similar face. And notice we have like a little birthmark on her face, which is different than what we see in the païenne, in the Vachier. We have similar type of crown, very similar scrolling, very similar up here. Although there is something here, it looks more like just a line. And then here we have some of the geometric nature of the Noblet here. Her hands in the Noblet are much more elegant. However, in these two, the hands are very similarly masculine, aren't they? Although, okay, we do see the same configuration in the skirted area. It's more similar to this than it was to the Noblet, but this area is a little bit different. And here we have the Madenié 1709, and we see a difference in the crown, the shape of the crown. It's more like a bishop's mitre, right? It's a little bit different. We still have the curtain or the veil behind her. We still have a similar type of dress with a book. This seems more in keeping with what we just saw in the Dodal. But unlike the Dodal and the Vachier, I think this is the Madenié of 1709 is far more elegant in the execution of the hands and the face. I think we probably all have already observed that in general with the Madenié. It's very refined. Okay, so here we have the Heri 1718. She's got a mumble's mouth. For those of you who are old enough to remember the original Dick Tracy cartoon. And we're going back to the, 40s or 50s. I think by the time I was a kid, they were already old. But there was a character called Mumbles. And the mouth here reminds me of Mumbles. Okay, so again, we have a different feeling of the crown. It's more similar to the Madenié crown, right? That we just saw, the Madenié crown of 1709. Again, we have a certain type of crown. Do we see it here in the Noblet? Not really. We have different crowns in the Noblet. The Vachier is not looking at us. The Noblet is. Although their winged birds on their shields are very similar. Again, we have those kind of wavy fingers. Not terribly elegant. We do have this interesting thing that occurs. And for those of you who are interested in what this could be or going down that rabbit hole, there's an excellent source in J.M. David's Reading the Marseille Tarot where he goes into the possibilities of what these things are. So once again, it's the J.M. David Reading the Marseille Tarot. The Dodal, 1701. Again, we have a similar bird, similar arrangement of clothing, lap, you know, this thing. Here we have the Pierre Madenié, 1709. Not exactly the same crown. Let me see, did I fail to mention that in the other? Dodal. Yeah, the Dodal's crown is similar. I don't know if I remember to say it, but their crown is similar. I just wanted to mention that. Okay, now here their crowns are different. They're birds. This bird is much more refined. But again, what deck am I using? I'm using the Madenié of 1709. So it's a more refined deck. Here we have the Heri, 1718. Similar crown, a little, but we do have a domed feature, which we don't see. This is more like a pyramid. Okay, next card is the Emperor. And unlike the TDM, supposedly, of the Noblet, they're facing in a different direction. Aside from just, they don't have the, you know, the second one doesn't have the engraver's mark of 4. And although there seems to be respect for a particular design, like a type of helmet that the king has and that he's bearded, that he has to have his staff and orb and a shield with a bird, and for whatever reasons, he needs to be cross-legged. But the details vary in that, you know, the Noblet really was a deck, I guess, you know, that wanted to be an original, I think. It may have, you know, followed the general norm of the Vachier, but, you know, the guy added his own 2 cents to it. Maybe he was just like a brave kind of individual, you know, who made specialty decks. I mean, there are people who make specialty decks today. Excuse me for taking a sip of my tea. I do have a grown-up sippy cup that no matter if I drop it, it won't spill. And I had to be reading cards for about 40 years before I allowed myself to have a grown-up sippy cup. But when I do some of these videos, they get long and I get parched. So, okay, so there's an adherence to or respect for something that came before it. So it does seem to follow a certain pattern, but it's quite individual. Now, the fact that it's printed backwards could be that it was just printed backwards. And as far as the words, go, maybe the words were put in different, separately. I don't know. I can't speak on that. Or it was just the image was copied on the plate exactly, in this direction. Of course, but when it flipped over, then the image would have been in reverse. So, I think reversals happened quite often. Okay, here we have the Dodal, which seems to be a pretty truthful rendering of the Vachier. They have that same goofy looking bird. Yeah, so it's like almost identical. They made a difference here. I don't see any indication, that there were buttons on this one. I don't see that. So perhaps this is something Fleur Noir did. Let me check and see if it appears on the Sullivan Hissmans. So I have that here in case we have Sullivan Hissmans also has the buttons in the front, but I really don't see any suggestions of that on the facsimile Vachier. So perhaps by the time of the Dodal, they copied it. They were a pretty true copy of this particular deck, but maybe they just got fancy with this clothing. But everything else is quite similar. Where are we? We're on the Madenié 1709. Again, very similar nature, not exactly, copying it, not the details aren't exactly the same, but the gist of it is the same, right? The same type of hat, a more refined and elegant face in the Madenié 1709. But it is an adherence to an elderly gentleman with facial hair. There is no markers, the engraver's marker on there. He's got a gold chain, which he also had in the Noblet. I'm getting confused which one I'm looking. So that's the Madenié. Okay, so this is the Madenié. Excuse me. This is the Madenié. Okay, let's compare it. Now I'm getting kind of confused myself with all these decks. The Heri, similarity, more similar in nature to the Madenié. So the Madenié and the Heri seem to be a bit more in keeping with one another. The medallion around his neck is similar. The helmet is similar. We have a greater refinement in the bird than we have in the Vachier. We no longer have I mentioned the engraver's mark. We even have this red embellishment around the top of this shield, which we don't see. So the Madenié and the Heri are quite similar. And I think we've noticed that with a few of the cards as we've gone. Okay, so here we have the High Priest or the Pope. So we have two tonsured fellows, one with a hat. Their hands are it's confusing what's going on here, but clearly this is somebody's hand. I'm not sure if this gentleman's hands can be seen. They're either subservient clergy or they're folks who've traveled. Who are they? I forget what the word is. They made a pilgrimage. Okay, so they could be pilgrims. We have the Pope with a cross on the gloved hands. Clearly a three-tiered crown. Pillars in the back. Okay, so let's check this out. We see a different sort of configuration with the top of the staff. We do have two individuals with tonsured heads. This one has a face. It's possible that this here could have been a hand, but it looks like it would be kind of crazy, but it does coincide with the Noblet's hand here. So yeah, the Noblet, it takes clues from the Vachier, but it's not like, it's its own thing. It's its own thing. It's interesting to see it like this. Okay, now we have the Dodal. And for any time that I've misspoke or you saw that I picked a card from a particular deck and I said the wrong thing, please just forgive me, okay? Because this is a lot of cards and, it gets confusing. Okay, so here we have an almost identical representation in the Dodal. We have greater refinement in the Madenié, which we see across the board. The crown is not so goofy looking. It's like, it's better proportion. The staff is a bit different. We do still have the pillars. We have the blessing and the cross on the back of the gloved hands. The configuration of the clothing is very similar, as are the positions of the individuals in front. Now I might as well keep the Heri and the Madenié together because they tend to go similar to one another. And they were created nine years apart. The Madenié 1709 and the Francois Heri 1718. So they're 9 years apart, but they have very, very similar design elements. Okay, we have the Lover card, blindfolded, shooting the arrow in the direction of the young man or slightly beyond him. It's hard to say. Maybe it would shoot this one's heart if we extend that line, right? It's hard to say because I'm not doing this perfect. Okay, what do we have here with the Noblet? Okay, we have the blindfolded. We have the chaos, the lines of energy and chaos around the putti figure. We have the arrow in a similar position between these two women. They do both seem to be women. But the Noblet, beyond just, getting the characters right and the general the general details right, the Noblet isn't like dependent on the Vachier to copy it, Exactly. When we get to I didn't properly put this down. When we get to the Dodal, what do we have here? Greater similarity to the Vachier. And now, of course, the Noblet is like tiny, it's petite, so they made that big change too. And look at the faces. They're much more similar. The hairstyle or whatever's in her hair. So the characters in the Dodal and the Vachier are far more similar to one another than these guys are in the Noblet. But the Noblet took the characteristics of, the putti and blindfold, the arrow going in a certain direction. This girl has to have flowers in her hair. This one, some type of wreath or whatever. And notice the similarity in spelling between the Vachier and the Dodal and how it differs from the Noblet. And I think that's the case with the Noblet that I probably already didn't mention when it became apparent. But I think the Noblet differs in the names too. Okay, so now where are we? Please forgive me because I'm getting confused. And I'm the one who's got to put all these cards back in their boxes in the right order and everything. So have pity on me. Okay, so here we clearly transition to a different type 2, right? Because we don't have the blindfolded putti. Although the arrow seems to be going kind of in the same direction. The putti itself is going in a different direction. We still have the pretty things in the hair, but they're so much more refined. So we must be looking at the Madenié of 1709. And then followed by the Heri of 1718. Again, a greater similarity to the Madenié than to the Vachier. So, maybe for whatever reasons, the style changed. I mean, styles change all the time, right? Or maybe somebody created what was considered a new gold standard. Sorry, I'm taking so long here. Okay, so here we have the Vachier Chariot. We notice the scalloped edge, those bulbous eyes in the soldier or the charioteer. We see the moon faces in his epaulets. We see how the horses are looking at each other in the Noblet. There's some differences. He's not looking at us directly. There are the scalloped edges of the surrey. We have horses that look at, this horse is giving this one a sideways glance, right? These horses are looking at each other, but here in the Noblet, they're not. And you notice the thing going on with the grass, or the ground. And it's not because they didn't make green, because in yesterday's video, or whenever I released it a couple days ago, we clearly see that, there's definitely a clear pigmentation of green, right? We have the secondary color of green, and we have, the secondary color of purple in this deck. So this Vachier was, I would say, kind of sophisticated, because it had it had secondary colors in addition to primary. So probably had like 5 or 6 colors. So the appearance of this particular patterning to create ground is interesting. And I've mentioned it in yesterday's video, and I've mentioned it in several of my videos whenever I see a card that has this kind of yellow over black or black over yellow, when they clearly could produce green. I commented on it almost all the time. And one of my viewers, and I apologize if I'm not I'm not going to say who I thought it was because I don't want to say the wrong name or anything. But this individual suggested that maybe because they could produce green, maybe it's a way to show parched land. Well, I use the word parched, but I think that the way they described it was to show straw, And my thought, I think that I mentioned in the video yesterday, was that maybe it was intended to show parched land. So it could have been straw that was, especially when we see it in the death card, right? It could be straw that's been hacked, that's what's kind of dead, right? Anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that soapbox there. We have the Dodal. Very similar. The horses are giving each other a sidewalk. Well, this horse looks a little vague. Let's see what he's doing in his eyes are kind of staring in the same direction. So there's a difference there with the horses. Scalloped edge. Faces on the epaulets. Look at this. We have this. We definitely have that. And we have it on the Sullivan Hissmans too. It's like the black and yellow. Then we get to the Madenié, 1709. And the horses are looking more like they did in the Noblet. Interesting. And then the Heri, 1718, is more similar to, it seems like it was more of a faithful copy of the Madenié 1709. And then plus we don't see the scalloped edge. So, clearly, these represent the newer style, or what is, it doesn't have to be the newer. I mean, in a way, in 1743, the païenne is a TDM style 1 because it was using the exact plates from 1639. So that would explain why a deck so late in tarot history would have the same images of 1639. But the other cards in between, I think, were maybe transitioning to a different style. Maybe. I mean, because they tend to be a little bit later, with the exception of as I mentioned, of the 1743 païenne, but there's good reason for that. Okay, Justice. Formidable lady in the Vachier. She's staring at us as she is in the Noblet. I got those two things similar. Now in the Vachier, we have a red thing on the hat, crown. We have a very similar motif above it. Okay. In the Dodal, we have the red thing. We have a very similar face. We have the same unusual shape of the wings. So there's a peculiarity from the get-go in what's going on, like on the other side of this sword with that wing. I mean, some people might argue that it's a wingback chair, or, because it's a virtue, they could be wings. So, who knows? Now there is a emblem here, but it's not red. However, it is red in the Heri of 1718. And then notice the Heri is not looking at us. Wow. That's interesting. But you can see, you know, how maybe by the time of the Madenié, you know, perhaps a attempt is made to, you know, take away some of the confusion, you know. I think the Heri did a really good job in getting rid of. Now we do have a little confusion regarding these scales of justice, because on the side of all of them we have this what looks like a spider web kind of growing, you know. It's interesting. Okay, the purple cloak of the Hermit. And this does appear to be a lantern, not an hourglass, but it's vague. It also looks like behind the lantern is the folds of his cloak. He's got a walking stick, which by day could serve as a timepiece. We see, I've mentioned this many times whenever I see a hermit that's got this white appearance in the cloak right around the knee. And we see it as early as the Vachier. So it's different. Same general ingredients, but the Noblet did it his own way. The Dodal, pretty close to everything in the Vachier. Faces are very similar. Madenié, 1709. Same ingredients, same, you know, roll of the cloth, you know, of his, you know, cloak. Gray-haired gentleman with a lantern. Many similarities. And with the Heri, we see a different guy. Wow. He's quite different than what we saw in the Madenié. So there have been numerous times when the Madenié and the Heri seem to be mimicking the Madenié, but not here. The Wheel of Fortune. So these three are very similar to one another. We get to the Madenié. So by the Madenié, they try to make sense of what this, if it's his legs, they just make it a more elegant pair of fantastic legs for this creature, who's wearing a skirt and has a tail. And the Madenié makes an effort to make more elegant the shoulder, what they imagine to have been the shoulder area of the monkey face guy. So that makes a lot of sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. Well, that's why Madenié was great. And then we have the Heri. Okay, moving right along at 49 minutes, we have Fortitude, the luscious purple gown, just as we saw in, I think, the Hermit, right? You got a purple gown too. The Noblet We see similarity to the hat, perhaps a little bit to the face, the gesture of the hands in relation to the mouth of the beast. The Dodal adds for export, which is an interesting touch. It's different. I mean, it had practical reasons, and I'm sure economic reasons for putting that on there on a deck of cards, because the laws may have been different if it was for export. But when you're doing a reading and you see this, you know, it could be interpreted as power coming from a different location, you know, or strength coming from a foreign area. It can become part of the reading. See, so for some of you who's hung out till 50 minutes, that might have just been worth sticking around for. You never know what I'm going to say or what anyone is going to say. You can learn from everyone. Okay, here we have the Madenié, 1709. Again, a more elegant depiction in the face, but honoring the details of the earlier deck, as does the Heri, which seems to try to mimic the Madenié, while also staying somewhat true to the image of the Vachier. The Hanged One. We have a red tongue here. We have a red tongue here. Legs crossed in the same configuration. Both of their words written in the correct direction, but the numbers being inverted on this one. The Dodal with the numbers inverted. The tongue is not red. The Madenié. More calm, serene character. Again, we don't notice the fingers behind the shoulders, which would, you know, be one of the features of TDM1, which I should have been commenting on all along, but I may or may not have mentioned other things. But I've done videos on how to distinguish between TDM1 and 2, so if you really want to find those. But we see, a emulation of the Madenié in the Heri, right? Because we have the attempt at a more refined face, got rid of those funny looking fingers coming from behind. Here's the death card, and again with the yellow paint over the black. Is it to show parchedness, dry land, dry earth? Because they clearly could do green. And with the Noblet, we appear to not have that overlay of color going in a different direction. And in the Vachier, it is not named. In the Noblet, La Mort is given. However, it is not named and going in the same direction in the Dodal. And there's a distinction between the yellow and the black. And let's see how Sullivan Hissmans did this. Sorry. I'm trying to keep everything. Yep. Sullivan Hissmans handled it in the same way. So it must be how it was handled in the original of the Dodal. And then we see a return to it in the, well, I don't know. It does, like the Dodal, it does seem to try to segregate the yellow from the red more. Whereas here it's like a coating. So maybe with TDM 2, they just got fancier with being able to show what they were trying to show. Now here we don't get it at all. We get just yellow. We don't really get a concern for the black, which is very interesting. And like the Vachier, the Heri has red hot joints, you know, which I see them and I can relate. I'm like, ouch, ouch. It's how my joints feel all the time. Everything always hurts. Temperance. Now we see those wings that we've seen in so many other decks, you know, so this is where it came from. These particular wings, we don't see them in the Noblet. They're different. Although in the Noblet, there is the little emblem that we, I think, saw in the Empress. Oh, it was an earlier card. I'm not sure which one it was. In the Dodal, we have the same wings. The same wings. Look at that. The same pattern. Ah, and then in the Dodal, we have a bosom that comes out of the clothing. In the Vachier, there's no confusion. It's her dress. And there's no confusion in the Madenié. And the Madenié refines the jagged wings, right? And just gives the essence of the jagged, you know, the layering of feather, but just does it in an elegant way. And as I've mentioned many times, the Heri seems to, you know, seems to admire the Madenié, you know, very much. And it's possible that somebody from the Madenié camp, you know, worked for Heri. You know, if you're Cartiers, I guess you take work where you can. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of how the card making business went in the 17 and 1800s, 16 and 1700s rather. But okay, so here we have a classic TDM1 devil, faces in the stomach, eyes perhaps, or boobies, the bat wings, things coming out of the head. So we have it there. We have it repeated in the Dodal. By the Madenié, we no longer have the face and the belly, although they're very similar to one another. The bat wings are a little smaller because Madenié refined the wings, and then Heri seems to have copied what the Madenié did. I'm amazed that I have not confused these decks. It's a miracle. Okay. The Tower. Now, is it coming, you know, like with the Noblet, people, and I think rightly so, argue that the flames appear to be coming from the building and not from the heavens, although it reaches the heavens. But here it's ambiguous. So this may be an anomaly of Noblet to make it, you know, because, you know, is it really, it's equal, an equal dynamic coming from the tower and from the heavens. Let's see what we get in the Dodal. Now here it looks a little bit more like it's coming from, but it is ambiguous. We have two people falling. Let's see how it differentiated here. We have two people falling. And the Madenié, the flames are, you know, are a little bit more elaborate and clearly coming from the heavens, as it appears to be from the Heri. the star. We do not have the little birdie in the Noblet, though we do have two trees on a tree on either side of the central figure. There's the same ambiguity about water going into the land or the earth, although here one clearly is going into land, and this one it looks like it's going on to earth. So this one looks like it's clearly decided. Okay, I guess here this is, this one is not so clear. Is it land or, it's not land, ocean or water, body of water, river, lake, whatever. And land, I think I said the wrong things before. And here, are they both going on to land? It's hard to tell. The Dodal. The same kind of wonky boobies, right? Awkward belly button. The bird. So there is an effort to mimic the Vachier. Confusion with what's going on with this chunk of land. And then with the Madenié of 1709, a much more elegant looking woman, refined body. She's pouring into the water as she is here and onto the land. So the Madenié got that, didn't get it confused. The bottle in the water and a bottle on the land being poured. And then the Heri. Now, what was my mistake? Oh, I didn't properly do the devil. Oh, I left out the devil, my bad. On that one. Okay, now we're on the moon. Here we have the Vachier moon, front-looking moon, the brain dogs, the towers. This is very interesting to see the earliest rendition of this. We see that looks like land. This looks like underwater, rocks underwater, and this crustacean pops through the land. It doesn't look like a bridge. And the Noblet, again, the front-facing moon, some type of celestial event with the rays, the towers, the brain dogs, the water, the rocks, the crustacean. And again, it looks like land. Maybe the banks of a river. So the attitude of this, the moon card, the attitude, the posturing of the buildings is the same. So this is like the Dodal is very, much more similar to the Vachier than it is to the Noblet, which came later than the Vachier, right? And then we see in profile the moon. But we still have the similar ingredients of the towers and the dogs in the same kind of position, and the grass and the crustacean coming up. Okay, we're almost done, folks. 19, the sun. What a happy, he looks like a jolly kind of guy. He's trying to keep it neutral, but you can tell he's a happy guy. And we have these awkward looking fellows, but I presume they're both men. Nothing feminine about those two. Although here, it could be argued that we have different gendered pair. We have the same ingredients of the sun and the wall. And then some type of, here we have a garden, and here we have, oh, it's vague what that is. Let's see if the Dodal clarifies it. So the Dodal, maybe it suggests that they're in a little short swimming pool. I don't know. I guess 400 years ago when you were hot, you swam just like you do today. Could be something that simple. You know, swimming or relaxing or having recreation in a walled area. Doesn't have to be anything more, you know, secret than that. And then we have the Madenié, and then we have the Heri. Judgement. Again with the red piece that I think we saw on Temperance, did we? And maybe on the Empress, I'm not sure. Don't quote me. But we have Gabriel blowing his horn from the clouds. He's got some type of flag on, some kind of emblem on the horn. And the figures, two facing and one with their back to us. One in the Vachier has a blue color, where the others are a little more fresh. But I notice we have the same kind of, you know, rolling hill in the background. Let's see what we have in the Dodal. We have yet a different flag from the other two, but more of a similarity in the depiction, the motif of the angel coming from the cloud, and what a big deal it is, right? It's like, woo, it's a spark of energy. And we have the blue figure between the two. And one does appear to be male, and the other one does appear to be female. And the Madenié just does the same thing, but brings a level of refinement to it. We don't have red in that part, although we do have that area in which it was returned to in the Heri. But by the Madenié, they found a more elegant way to make the cloud, right? So we're almost done, folks. The world. Yes, we're done. Okay, so here we have TDM1. We have the image of Christ, long hair. We presume it's Christ. The 4 apostles, or representation of that. He's got a cape, and he's got something going around his private area. In the Noblet, it becomes a little bit ambiguous. Is it a male or is it a female? Again, making reference to the J.M. David reading the Vachier Tarot book. He has discussion how at certain points in history, Christ was referenced as a female. So if it was depicted in this way, if Christ was depicted with feminine attributes, it would not have been strange to them as it is to us, because Christ was often referenced as gentle, I guess, like a woman. Anyway, we have many of the same features, although done differently. However, when we get to the Dodal, it's more similar. It looks like it's trying to copy the Vachier. and everything is very similar. We have a little confusion about what's going on under here. That probably was facial hair. It looks like it would have been, but not terribly eloquently put in, you know, and maybe it wasn't facial hair, but that's what it kind of looks like to me. Let's see what Madenié did with it. Well, it became feminine. Okay, and then we no longer have a cape, but we have like a ribbon. And I think ideally the ribbon would have been flowing in the direction to show it as a C, representing Christ. But we have a very feminine looking figure in the Madenié, as we do in the Heri. So there we have it, friends. I just wanted to, let me flip the camera. Thank you very much for hanging out with me this long. You know, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you made some discoveries. I did. That's why I do these. You know, I do it for myself. So if I'm going to do this exercise for myself every time I get a new deck, I might as well share it with you, which is what this, you know, channel has become. So, you know, I guess it's poor salesmanship on my part to mention it after I've been on here for an hour. But if you're still here with me and you haven't already subscribed, please give me the courtesy of a subscription, a thumbs up, a comment, anything that will help my channel. This is a small channel. I've been around on this channel since 2016, and I don't even have 3,000 viewers yet. And I feel like I should have more. So please subscribe, share me with friends, help me reach my 3,000, which would be a nice goal for the new year. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, do no harm. And you haven't seen the last of me. I've got a few great videos coming up. My next video will undoubtedly be Marco Benedetti's LFS Levy deck. I'm looking forward to doing that. And then I even have another little surprise for you later on. And so take care. See you soon.